Hey, it's RC from Survivor School. And if you're feeling stuck in survival mode, overwhelmed and exhausted by a trauma cycle that seems to control every part of your life, we get it, and we're here to help. We know that healing doesn't happen 1 hour a week in a therapist's office. It happens every day in real time and real life. That's why we brought together over 20 trauma-informed specialists and experts who understand how trauma impacts your brain, your body, and your life. We've built a supportive community of other survivors who get you and who've always got your back. Look, healing is a journey of 1,000 destinations, and we believe that every milestone should be celebrated. We'll guide you on a journey that helps you turn down the trauma response and regain control of your health, your relationships, your finances, and help you build your dreams. So if you're ready to break free from survival mode and start living the life you deserve, join Survivor School today. We get you, and we've got you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. Before we get too far into the show, I want to make sure that you and my audience know that I am keenly aware that you have the choice of a myriad of podcasts to listen to. I'm grateful that you chose this one. If you've tuned into this podcast before, you already know that this show serves a dual purpose. First, providing a safe space for victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault to share their experiences to facilitate healing. Second, it educates listeners on the principles of a trauma-informed response, going beyond superficial understanding to foster effective advocacy. The goals of this podcast are to promote healing and provide a furthering of your knowledge about the prevalence of rape culture in our communities and how being trauma-informed is a powerful step in reducing that prevalence. Thank you again for joining me today. I'm glad you're here. This is episode 132, the final installment of a 3-part series with my guest, Rachel Izzo. I hope you've had the chance to listen to Rachel's first 2 episodes, as those explain both her frustration with her past experiences and culminate in this episode with her hope for the future. This is powerful, and I encourage you to listen all the way to the end. We'll pick up right where we left off from last week's episode. Here's Rachel.
They all blacklisted me after this experience. But this fandom, we call it, is just full of really unhealthy, unhealed women that are just stuck in their trauma. And I was a part of that. And I met up with these girls that I went to the gala with, actually. I met them in May, some of them in May. And they were good friends at the time. They were my friends. They knew what had happened, and I trusted and confided in them. And we had our little group, and they met me at the bus stop with signs. They were good friends. And my way of dealing with the stress was humor. So I was going there to do one of the most traumatizing things at that point, which was to call my rapist on the phone and try to get him to admit that he raped me. That's not an easy thing to do. So I'm internally freaking out, but then I'm like, I need to distract myself and have fun. So at the time, all these girls, we were just having fun. We went out a couple times. I had 2 of my friends came with me to the precinct. I had to meet with the NYPD before my control call, and we were goofing off. And a bunch of the detectives didn't like that because they thought I was just having a good time and making shit up. That's what they said later. I'll get to that. But they thought because I was laughing and goofing off, then that this wasn't a real thing that had happened. The only way that I could function being in that precinct was to be in an alternate reality where I was having fun, because I couldn't face what had happened with the detective, because I was seeing them. I was like, oh my God, now everything's coming back to me. I'm going to have fun and just laugh because I can't go there. So we go to the precinct, and I just laugh because the sign says Special Victims Division, home of the greatest detectives on earth. And that's just laughable. It's fucking laughable. So at the time, this is important to what happened with the show later. I was staying with a friend on the Upper East Side, and the precinct, I think they moved it, but it was in Harlem. It was in a really sketchy area. And I was staying on the Upper East Side, and SVU happened to be filming right on that corner for 4 days that I was there. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's an odd coincidence. I was staying in an apartment with a friend right on that corner. And I say that because I think they thought I was stalking them. Literally, I think they thought I was stalking them because I would walk by every day, but I literally had to walk through their set to get to a train station. So I was walking through the set every day, seeing these actors. Some of them remember me, some of them didn't. I was there for a few days. I had a couple interactions that were really pleasant. I didn't see Mariska. She was, again, always the savior, like, I always wanted to talk to her. And I thought she cared about me and all this shit. That's just a lie. I ran into an actor, Danny Pino, who ended up being very, very nice, very kind. I connected with him. And I went up to the precinct, just distracting myself on the set, goofing off with my friends when we got to the precinct. This detective that was kind to me was off shift at that point, but actually picked me up before he was going home because he wanted to make sure I was okay. And he sat and prepped me. He was off the shift. He was not on the clock. And I want to say that because it was a very kind thing to do. He prepped me as best as he could without having been in my case because Skorzuski wasn't doing shit. I went there one of those days and I did the control phone call with Skorzuski and didn't get shit. This guy's a writer. The shit that he was having me say was so not like myself that it sounded so scripted that I'm just like, he probably knows. This is so out of the blue. It was stuff trying to get him to say he actually raped me. And I'm like, I'm not going to get him to say that's impossible. Like, it was so scripted. And I remember just doing this and being, this is like, I just want this to be over. Like, there's no way that this is going to work. It didn't. They didn't get enough, but they still said they were going to at least talk to him at some point to try to get him to admit something or whatever. So I knew that didn't go well. I left, had a complete meltdown, just started sobbing. All of this shit that I've gone through for what? Nothing. And I was walking back to the apartment I was staying at, and I passed by the SVU set again, and they were filming. And I ran into this actor, again, Danny Pino, who played this wonderful detective on TV and who was a savior for the victims. And I was bawling my eyes out. And I had this moment with him that I just word vomited everything that was going on. He was like, whoa. But he told me, you're really strong, you're brave. He said all the things that I needed to hear in that moment. I felt kind of bonded. I was like, that was a really beautiful moment. And this is important later because, again, I was walking through their set every day. Not on purpose, but because I was staying there. They happened to be filming right there. There's a website called On Location Vacations where you can see where everything is filming, any place that films, because you have to have permits to say people can't park here. So if you want to stalk actors, you can go and stalk them. I didn't do that. I just happened to have a lot of chance run-ins based on, later where I lived, and I went to NYU. But that day, I just happened to be walking back and forth multiple times. So I think they accused me of stalking later. And the only thing I can think of was maybe that was why. So that's important later. Control phone call, didn't go anywhere. I was so stressed, I got sick. So the day before I left, I met up with Skorzuski because I really wanted to say all I wanted to face that I'd written down. And I didn't have it in me. I was like, I met up with him. We had coffee. And I was just like, oh, are we okay? Like, it's my fault. It's like, are we okay? Oh, let me backtrack a little bit too. At the time, when I was quote unquote goofing off at this precinct because I was trying to cope with the trauma, there was a female detective there, I don't remember her name, who just hated me. And I could tell, did not like me. She was a tall, blonde detective. That's all I remember. I don't remember her name. And she just did not like me. She would snap at me because I was quote unquote goofing off. That's how I was coping. And that's important later. So I will go back to Seattle. Nothing came in the control phone call. Skorzuski said, we're going to try to talk to him. And then that's going to be it. We can't prosecute this case. And I was like, okay, well, can you just at least let me know when you talk to him? At the same time, I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but there was a sexual assault on the NYU campus around this time that was like a nun or some church person that was coming out of the NYU chapel that was raped. I don't know do you remember hearing about that? It made national news.
Yeah, it did make national news. And I vaguely remember just those sketchy things that you just mentioned, but that's about all I remember.
So I say that because they were all in on that. They diverted all of their other cases and were all focusing on this case. I was pushed to the back burner. So there was a day in November of 2013 that they were supposed to go talk to the rapist. Skorzuski said, again, because I couldn't call him on his cell phone anymore, I had to call the precinct. I called him and I said, okay, so what's going on? They said, okay, we're going to go talk to him today. Well, what I had done before that is I had confronted this guy myself. So I said again that they weren't doing anything for me. So I did the control phone call, which was dumb. That didn't get anywhere. So I'm like, okay, they're not going to do shit. I'm going to confront him in my way. I called him one day. We were on Skype and I confronted him and I told him that I felt like he raped me. I said everything. And of course he denied it. That was my closure because NYPD wasn't doing shit. November comes. They said, we're going to go talk to him today. We'll call you later. That's what Skorzuski said. 8 hours go by, nothing. So I'm getting kind of nervous now. I was waiting. I was just sitting there by my phone waiting. Call the precinct. This detective, this blonde detective, I knew her voice. She picked up the phone. She said, Rachel, your case is closed. Don't call her anymore. I said, what? What? Excuse me? Yeah. Your case is closed. Don't call her anymore. I said, no. Skorzuski, Luke was supposed to go talk to Detective Skorzuski is busy. I said, no, he was supposed to go. I didn't respect him anymore, so I called him by his first name. And then she says, I'm sorry he gave you an STD, but that doesn't mean anything criminal happened. Don't call her anymore. And she hung up on me. I freaked the fuck out. I was hysterical. My mom was there at the time, and I told her, and she was like, oh, fuck no. So she called the precinct back, and she was yelling. My mom was assaulted by an OBGYN in like the 80s. She called the SVU precinct and was basically screaming at this woman because she was the only one there at the time, because they were all resources were diverted to this stranger sexual assault at NYU. And the detective said the same thing to my mom, got nowhere. They just closed my case. They never talked to the guy, and I never heard from Skorzuski again. I emailed him. So then I was trying to call the lieutenant. He wouldn't answer. I called his cell phone. No one would answer me. Then I blocked my number and called the lieutenant, and he picked up. So they were all avoiding my phone calls. And I was, okay, that says everything I need to know. He picked up when it was an unknown phone number. I don't even remember what I said. I said, what is going on? He goes, oh, we talked. I think he lied. I don't remember what he said. Like, it was some bullshit. Detective Rama, the nice one, did call me the next day. I was at work, so I didn't hear. And I texted or called him back. And I think I called him back, and he was like, look, I know this is really hard for you. These cases are really hard to prosecute. I want you to know that I believe. He was really nice. And I want to spotlight that because there are good ones out there. I wish I'd had him from the beginning. Like, I'll just put it that way. Like, I think that my life would be very different if I'd had him from the beginning. And he was wonderful. But I wanted to hear it from Skorzuski because he was the one on my case. He was assigned to it, and he was the lead investigator. And I tried to call him. He never called me back. I emailed him, and it was like November 2013 still. And he said, I'm out with an eye injury. I'll call you when I get back. Never heard from him again. At one point, he had said he was mad because I had confronted this guy myself. And I was like, well, what did you expect me to do? Like, you guys weren't doing anything. But I never heard from him again. I went back out to New York in November 2013 for another gala. It wasn't the Joyful Heart, but it was something related. I met up with another survivor. She was this young girl, I think she was like 18. She's young by my standards. She really wanted to meet Mariska. And I was like, okay, I know where they're filming today. I can take you up there. I don't really want to go. It's long, but again, that's where the filming, location are posted. I was like, if you really want to meet her, sure, I'll go with you. And I wanted to tell Danny Pino had been a moment of sunshine for me in this dark time when I was going through this controlled phone call. And I was like, okay, if we go up there and he's filming, I want to thank him. So I go up there and I have a letter. I was, again, one that was kind of living not fully in this fantasy world. It's easier to live in this alternate universe that's created on TV where detectives actually fucking care and do the right thing. And a lot of people get this sense of comfort by interacting with the cast because it feels like they're interacting with the real SVU, but they're not. And I was still in that mentality of like, okay, they care about me, so that's better than nobody, better than no one on the NYPD caring about me because they have a close relationship with the NYPD. So I see Danny Pino and I have a letter, and his mentality was a 180. He was rude. He said, yeah, I know who you are. I said, well, I have a letter for you. I just want to thank you. Well, I don't have time to read it. Takes my letter, stuffs it in his pocket, and slams the door in my face. And I was like, okay, don't know what that was about. I'm still Facebook friends with one actor on the show. I don't know who knows what at this point, but it was very clear that there was some not so nice talk going on about me because I don't know where that came from. The next day I get a phone call from Joyful Heart saying that they don't want me to ever contact them or the actors ever again. And I was like, what? They said something like alluding to like that I was stalking them, and I was like, how am I stalking them? Like, it was, I don't know where they were coming from. I have theories that I was a liability. What happened with me, one with the writer, and then with their close relationship with the NYPD, I was a fucking liability. So it was easier to write me off as crazy and treat me like garbage and just tell me to never contact them again than to actually do the right thing and own up to some of their mistakes and owning up to the fact that, I was treated pretty rudely by cast. That's the only thing I can think of because I had been walking through every day that week, but it's because I had to walk through the sets to the subways. I think it was a combination of that, and I was a liability. I think it was a combination of the two, that it was easier for them to put me in this box that she's a crazy, traumatized victim that needs to stay away from us, which was heartbreaking because Mariska had been my hero, and they just blacklisted me. They said, don't ever contact us or her ever again. And Joyful Heart is supposed to be the one that champions survivors and, is for them and for the people and does all this good. They blacklisted me. They cut me off. And I have a couple other friends that were really harmed by them as well. And I'm still good friends with these women to this day that were all traumatized by interactions with Joyful Heart Foundation. And the people who aren't supposed to hurt you do, that's the most traumatizing. I was living in this hope that someone in that upper realms of either SVU, the real SVU, or the fake SVU, someone just fucking believed me and listened to me. And they cut that off for me. Like the NYPD didn't do anything. And then they cut that hope off. That was the lowest point in this entire process when they cut me off. It was so important for me to have someone just listen to me, Mariska, or just someone in that upper sphere of influence that were like, yes, we believe that this man did this to you and we're sorry. That was so important to me at the point. And they took all that from me. They cut me off and they said to never contact them ever again. There was a woman, her name was Monica, that I'd been in contact with. I think she's a therapist that worked for Joyful Heart. And I'd been in contact with her a couple of times. She had given me resources. I think she was they didn't want me close to SVU because I was a liability. It was going to ruin their image that, a former SVU writer raped somebody. Obviously, that's not a great image. So in hindsight, I think the interactions I'd had with this person named Monica, she was trying to push me away from them. After this other person had called me and said, like, don't call Joyful Heart ever again, I called Monica and I knew her voice. She picked up the phone and I said, may I speak to Monica? And she said, who's speaking? I said, am I speaking to Monica? Who's speaking? I knew it was her. I said, this is Rachel Izzo. She goes, oh, sorry, Monica's not in and you're not allowed to call her anymore. And she hung up on me. And I was like, wow, okay. So that was in this whole year, that was the lowest point for me. These people are frauds. If this is how they're going to treat me for no reason. I still to this day don't truly understand the reason that they treated me that way. I have my theories again. They thought I was quote unquote stalking them. I don't know. I think walking by once a day, even if I was doing it on purpose, it takes a little bit more than that to accuse someone of stalking. To this day, I still do not know the reasons exactly as to why they cut me off the way they did. In that whole year, that was probably the worst part of it, was that moment when they cut me off, because the people who were supposed to be on my side turned against me. And I'm like, now no one's going to believe me. Now my chances of trying to get into an industry that is so hard to get into as a writer, they're gone. I wanted these people on my side because I named a very big writer. He was my mentor and he was helping me get into the industry. And I lost that chance by reporting him, but I thought it was the right thing to do. So I'm like, if these people believe me, then maybe I could still have a name for myself. And they just completely blacklisted me. Over the years, slowly, this was so fucking painful. I was Facebook friends with a lot of crew still. Like I chatted with them sometimes. Just slowly, they started unfriending me. I would go on Facebook one day, they had deleted me as a friend. And it was like this very, very slow removal. It was so hard. It was so painful because people that I really thought, I was like, well, maybe someday I'll talk to this person and tell them and maybe they'll believe me. Then I would see they deleted me off Facebook. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, there goes that. That continued to happen even to a couple years ago. I'm still Facebook friends with a couple, maybe one or two people, that's it. And I do not know if they know the extent of what happened. So that was the tail end of 2013. Somebody along the way, I don't remember who it was, said you could have a legit lawsuit one day. And I kind of thought about it in the back of my mind. I didn't ever think I was going to do it. So December 2013, I couldn't get out of bed. My life had crumbled between SVU chopped me off the ankles, the real SVU, and then the fake SVU. I couldn't get out of bed. I was so depressed. Finally, I was, you know what, I'm tired of feeling like this. I need to just start to heal. So I moved to New York still. I still was like, okay, I'm still going to go to New York. That's still my dream. Got into nursing school in April of 2014. So I moved there in January of 2014. Got into NYU in the springtime. I was sitting in Washington Square Park one day and I'd already been admitted to another college. I was like, you know what? I want to go to NYU. And I got in. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to NYU. I didn't know if I could handle it because it was an accelerated program and I was still dealing with the trauma, the physical effects on my body, which were really difficult. I was like, I don't know if I can handle the rigor of an accelerated program, but I was like, okay, I got in. I'm going to take it as a sign. I'm going to go. So in April 2014, I was still doing prereqs for the program and I decided to report the NYPD to internal affairs. So I took a friend with me. They were like Upper Manhattan somewhere. And I decided to file an IAB case against the NYPD with what happened. IAB, they always talk about IAB. They're the enemy. You know, it's kind of like I'm a nurse. JCO, we talk about Joint Commission. IAB is kind of like the equivalent of what hospitals view JCO as. So if you're in healthcare, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, you're the enemy. So I always remembered IAB, and I knew that was a real thing. So I decided to think about inquire about an internal affairs report into the Special Victims Division because of what happened. I wanted them to be aware because of how I was treated. I mean, even if you take out the blatant, frankly, crime that I think you could call it, of what he did was a crime, even if you take that part out, I was still treated like shit by the female detective. All those people just wrote me off. Either way, I was like, that I have to laugh about it now and I tell it because it's so ridiculous. That actually happened. When I tell people, they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. That's my life. That was my life. I was like, well, let me just start the process. So I forget where IAB was, but I brought a friend with me because I was like, from that point on, I am not having a single interaction with the police by myself. I just didn't trust them. I brought a friend with me and I sat in an office. The experience itself doesn't stand out. So I think it went well considering my prior interaction. I remember going there and like telling the story, but don't remember a lot of details. So I think it was a relatively okay interaction, or else something would have stood out. That was April 24th. I just went in there, did my report, and then just kind of left it up to the universe essentially. I started nursing school, basically 2 years of nursing classes condensed into 12 months, 15 months. I started that in September of 2014. So I hit the ground running, sorry, 4 semesters. So I hit the ground running, and it was always kind of in the back of my head, that internal affairs, but I kind of just like left it alone. I don't want to think about it. I moved on with my life. And then I hadn't heard anything. Finishing up my first semester, I was in the middle of finals. I think I had just thought to myself like a week before, like, I wonder what happened with that IAB. Like, I just hadn't heard anything. And I kid you not, like the second before I was about to walk into a practical exam, I got an email from Internal Affairs, and it said your case was partially substantiated. That's all we can tell you. That's essentially what it said. So I think partially substantiated, they're not going to do shit. I had been just holding on to hope, and I got this email. It's not funny, but this poor professor, I walked into this practical and completely burst into tears. I just had a complete meltdown because I was just so angry. I'm like, this was worthless. This was pointless. And bless her heart, she took me aside. She was like, are you sure you want to do this now? I'm like, I can do it. And I passed. It was fine. Luckily for me, she, I think, ended up talking to somebody at the school, just told them what was going on. And that ended up connecting me with my social worker, who was an angel, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I had that experience, finished the semester, and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm moving on with my life. I got a letter in the mail as well. So at my parents' house in Seattle, I got a hard copy letter, what they said in the email. Your case was partially substantiated. Appropriate action is going to be taken. I couldn't get details, whatever. So this was Christmas of 2014. I had, I think, like 3 or 4 weeks off in between that semester and the next one. So I was just enjoying time in Seattle. I remember I was a few days, I was about to go back to New York, and I was sitting in the house in Seattle, and I see a New York phone number pop up on my phone. And it was like 9 p.m. in Seattle. So for some reason, I was like, oh, maybe it's NYU. I need to answer the phone. But like, it would have been midnight in New York. So I answer the phone, and they say, this is so and so from the New York Daily News. We're releasing your story tomorrow. Do you want to say anything? And I was like, what? I really want to emphasize, when you're healing from trauma, there's a very distinctive moment where you make that conscious decision to say, I'm moving on from this, and I need to, and not forget about it, push it away, but I need just to not be a part of this anymore, and I'm going to move on. And I had done that. So I'm like, okay, this chapter of my life is done. I did what I could. I'm moving on. So I had to let go, and I'm free from all this crap. Then I get this phone call, and I literally was like, what? She repeats herself. This is so-and-so from the New York Daily News. We're releasing your story tomorrow in the newspaper. Do you want to say anything? And I was basically, what the fuck are you talking about? So they had a source in internal affairs or somewhere in the NYPD that knew about my case. And it was so juicy that they were going to release it. I had no say in it at all. My name was not being released, but the next day, plastered all over the front page of the New York Daily News, was everything that the NYPD had done to me. There was a sequence of every day for like the span of a week. There was a story that came out about my case that was on the front of the Daily News. And if you live in New York, That newspaper is literally everywhere. Like it's on the floor of the subway cars. I saved every
Yeah.
single one. I have them in a box in my closet still. And I remember one, the front page said sex cop stripped. That was like the headline. I mean, it made great headlines, but it was so sensationalized. It brought up everything. And then I'm back in New York. I'm
Yeah.
literally seeing my story literally on the ground everywhere that I'm going. It's in every subway station. I had just
Well,
closed that door in my head, and all of a sudden it's nope, here we are. And then it was horribly displayed. The way that they wrote it was so awful. It was so sensationalized. It made me sound, my name wasn't mentioned, but you can Google it and find it. They made me sound like a jealous lover. When Scorsese cut me off from communication, the way they phrased it made it sound I was upset he stopped talking to me because I was in love with him. It was horrible. So then the comments that I was getting were absolutely horrific. And I still have a few. I'm going to try to find them as I'm talking because this is slut shaming and it was just awful. I had a complete meltdown. I had a breakdown, an absolute breakdown, just complete trauma flare up. I stopped sleeping, anxiety. It was awful. I told somebody what was going on because I couldn't function. I had told that professor that I had had the meltdown with. I didn't know who to turn to. So I told her what was going on. And then she called the social worker, and I ended up meeting her, which was an absolute godsend. I finally was like, okay, I want to say something because this is not being portrayed right. So I ended up doing an interview. So it's supposed to be anonymous, but they took a photo of me that has my profile, and you can absolutely tell it's me. Anyone who had maybe met me even a couple times could tell that was me from that photo. And I was so pissed, and I was really pissed off because I didn't want to be identified yet. After that, again, it made me sound like I was a jealous lover. It was terrible. It was not the truth of what happened. It was not how I wanted it to be portrayed. I was getting things like bitch had it coming, slut deserved it, bad things. So then Sonia Osorio, she's the president of Now in New York. They had a bunch of articles that came out and like Gothamist and stuff after this. They were making comments, positive comments. And then I was getting comments, Ice-T wouldn't pull no shit like that. I see an SVU episode in the making, and I'm just there's so many nuances to why all this was so triggering to me that it was everywhere. It was all over Twitter, it was all over Facebook. And then the best part was that Scorsese's wife started commenting on the posts on Facebook on the New York Daily News. She started naming me. You're not allowed to name rape victims unless they decide to be named. And she was calling me a liar. She was saying Rachel Izzo is a liar. I don't know how she sleeps at night when we know the truth. All this was public. And I contacted the reporters. I was like, you need to take these down. Like, I do not want my name out there. This is his wife that's naming me, calling me a slut and a liar all over Facebook with my full name. At this point, I ended up in the sexual assault coordinator's office in at NYU, which ended up being a complete godsend. Christine, she's amazing. I ended up doing therapy with her, and she helped me through that entire time. But at the same time, so then I found out through the news outlet that they were keeping their job. So their punishment was they were temporarily stripped of their badges or their guns or whatever, their detective abilities. I don't know how that works, but they kept their jobs. Skorzuski was just transferred into another unit, and the lieutenant, he retired with his full pension. So I found this out all through the media, which again I wasn't happy with. Would have been nice that they had done a little bit more, and the lieutenant ended up being more in trouble for stealing overtime than what he did with taking me out drinking. So that shows you where their priorities are. As it was going on, now that it was thrust back in my face, I started remembering that lawsuit thing. This was all in January 2015 at this point. I started really thinking about the lawsuit, and I was, you know what? Let me just see. Let me just look into it. I don't know what's going to happen. So I literally Googled attorneys NYPD lawsuit. I just something so random, and a guy popped up on Google, Christopher Galliardo. He was my attorney. At 24 years old, I walk into this super high end law practice in downtown Manhattan by myself and say, I want to sue the NYPD. Talk about ballsy. It's funny because I was like, I had no idea what I was getting myself. Really had no idea. I met with him and talked about what happened, and he was basically like, what the actual fuck? And he was like, I think we have a legit case here. So I decided I was going to move forward, but it was hush hush, like it was not public yet. While this was going on, I was working through all the trauma. My lovely, amazing social worker, Christine at NYU, I was a part of a club on campus, like a sexual assault prevention group. And one day they had, I remember her name now, Susan Herman. She was deputy officer of public affairs or whatever. She was a liaison between the community and NYPD. She came to give a talk to our group, and Christine was like, "Are you sure you want to go to this?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go." Susan Herman phrased the question to our group hypothetically, like this doesn't have to be true, but hypothetically speaking, if you were assaulted, would you go to report or not to the police? Why or why not? That was her question. Of course, I had a lot to say, but I kept quiet. I remember I was sitting like directly across from Christine, and Susan Herman was like right here. So was right across from Christine, and her eyes kind of got big, and I just kind of looked down. I was like going to keep my mouth shut for a little bit. So after a couple of people responding with just kind of flimsy answers, I have something to say. And I forget exactly what I said, but I said something like, my name is Rachel and I'm from Seattle and I had a really terrible experience with the NYPD. And she looked at me and she goes, I know exactly who you are. I'm like, okay. So I left it at that. And then I said something about like why I wouldn't report. I don't know what I said, but Christine was giving me like, she was like applauding quietly. So afterwards, I went up to Susan Herman and she gave me her business card. She was like, if you ever want to chat, here's my email. I sent her an email. I don't remember why I did, but I did. And she ended up calling me. She asked, like, can I call you? I said, sure. So she asked me, she said, if I had the ability to have your case reopened and basically reinvestigated properly, would you want that? And Christine was like, because I called her, I didn't trust NYPD at all. So I called her while I was sitting in Christine's office. Christine, she got like really big eyes. And I was like, yeah, I think I would like that. Like, just to know that it was done properly. So after we got off the phone, Christine was like, she would not be offering this to you if she wasn't already planning on doing it, with your permission. So lo and behold, like a week or two later, I got an email or phone call saying that she had handpicked these two detectives that she felt were the best special victims unit detectives in the NYC borough area to reinvestigate my case. Again, meanwhile, this lawsuit is building behind the scenes. So right around that time, my lawsuit goes public. So then the headlines explode that I'm suing the NYPD, and we sued for $3 million. I did not remotely see any of that money, just in case anyone wants to know. Like it was not for the money. Would have been nice to get some. This hits the news, and then again, there's tons of stories. At this point, I kind of tuned the comments out. I made the mistake a couple times of reading them, and again, it would send me into this awful spiral. And then they're still deciding to investigate my case. So I felt kind of like, am I allowed to do this? But I was like, I don't care. I'm doing both, right? Like, what do I got to lose at this point? And I really thought, I'm like, okay, if they investigate my case again, hopefully it'll be done the right way. What could go wrong? Meanwhile, I'm in nursing school, accelerated nursing school program. So I'm overloaded on credits. I'm super loading nursing classes. Have a lawsuit going on. I have all this media stuff coming up. And then now I have another case open. And it was just a lot. So while this lawsuit is building, my case is being reopened. These detectives call me. So it's a female detective. And I don't trust anybody at this point, regardless of gender in the NYPD. But I was like, okay, like, well, maybe a female detective would be nice. Maybe they'll be slightly more understanding. And to be fair, she was nice. That's great. However, her lieutenant led the investigation, which was fine until we had our interview. And we met on campus. This was like April, May of 2015 at this point. They wanted to just do everything from scratch. They were like, we have the notes. There's a lot of holes. No surprise. There was a lot of gaps. They wanted to make sure I got everything right. I chose a day to meet, and I asked Christine if she could. She said she would stay there with me. She lived like an hour and a half outside of the city, so it was very nice that she would stay late, but she did. My first interview with NYPD had been 3 hours, so I had a test the next day, and I had a half day of class that day, so I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a quick interview, 3 hours, maybe max. I can go home, get sleep, and study. So we met in a room, and they didn't want Christine there, and I said, I'm not doing this interview without her. She's my advocate. She can be here. I know the rules. I'm not doing this without her. So they let her stay. What ended up happening was 8 hours of interrogation, and I felt like I was the perpetrator. Every fucking word that came out of my mouth, the male detective would interrupt me and try to spin it like it was my fault. So His tactic was like, well, we have to be prepared. If you go on the stand, this is what they're going to do. But it made me feel like the perpetrator, and that there was so much victim blaming and victim shaming. It was some of the worst 8 hours of my life. Not now, but at that time, it was the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. And about 4 hours in, we took a break. Christine was like, you need a break. And I was like, yeah. And I walked into the bathroom, and I collapsed in a stall in tears because it was so awful. And she came in after me, and she was, do you want to stop? And I didn't know what to do. Like, it was so terrible just how they were speaking to me. And the female detective didn't say anything. It was just this male detective interrogating me. Everything that I would say, he would stop and refute. Like, well, are you sure you did this? Like, well, maybe you really did want it. All this stuff. It was 8 hours of that. It was awful. Needless to say, I didn't get out till pretty late, and then I didn't sleep great. And it was like my lowest scoring test that I got. It was so traumatic. And I was like, no, this is not worth it. Even though they're quote unquote investigating it correctly, it is not worth it. But I did it. Up until that point, I had always said to people, if this happens to you, yes, you should report, because it's probably going to be a better experience than what I had. Don't use my experience as the norm. But at that point, I was like, no, it's not worth it. It was terrible. It was like I was the perpetrator. They need to have a better tactic. There needs to be a better way to interview victims. That was like spring of 2015. Lawsuit was still going on. Around that same time, I was in this class. I was working through all the things in the therapy with Christine. I confided in a professor who I'm still friends with today. There was, again, always like an article every other week that would come out. It would be about my lawsuit, or I kind of lived in this limbo for a while. The NYPD was investigating my case, and I had this lawsuit going on. And that was my entirety of 2015, was this limbo. And I just left the case that was going on. I don't want any involvement. I'd had enough involvement with NYPD. I'm just going to let them do their thing. I'm also going to say, this is a tangent, but it's important. This was a really weird thing that happened to me. While this was going on, I had a pediatric clinical, and I was in a rotation in a cancer ward at Mount Sinai. My cohort and I were dealing with this child. He was 7. And we could, as like nursing students, you can't do anything. Like, especially with kids, like they don't let you do anything. You basically sit and read to them. Like, you can't do anything. So we were sitting with this kid, and I was like reading to him or something, and he grabbed my crotch. I was sitting there, and he grabbed my crotch. And 7 years old, okay. Luckily, I had 3 witnesses with me that all saw this. My colleague, her eyes got really wide. And I said, that's not appropriate touch. I said something that I thought a 7-year-old would understand. Well, he did it again. And I was like, a 7-year-old should not be doing this. There's something really wrong here. I went to my clinical leader. I told her what happened. They told the doctors and like the child psychologist, and they went and talked with me. And I was like, look, this is really weird for me because I'm dealing with my own thing right now. And in a weird way, that was very triggering, but he's 7. And there's also clearly been some abuse at home, most likely, or he's seen something. Like, that's not normal for a 7-year-old, right? I remember this day just being so bizarre because I was really triggered, but it was also, there was something really bad that was happening with this kid, and then I was in the middle of it, and the leaders were so sorry this happened, especially to you of all people, but thanks to you, we understand there's something going on at home that's not right. And I remember I left that day, and this is an important part of the story. It just kind of adds to the whole like culture of victim blaming. I left early that day because it was a lot to process, just what I was dealing with. I went home. I ended up having a meeting with the pediatric person who was teaching us pediatrics that semester because I was, you should know that this happened. This is why I left early. This woman yelled at me for 20 minutes saying, what the hell were you doing on his bed? You could have been accused of sexual assaulting him. Blamed me for him touching me, essentially. And I was, what? It was so mind-boggling and out of left field. And I had like 3 of my colleagues with me because everyone at the clinical was so supportive, and they thanked, this is a shitty situation, but thanks to you, he's going to get help, all this stuff. And then she's yelling at me, blaming me. So then, of course, it triggered this victim blaming in me, right, which I'd been dealing with for a year. I remember I walked out of her office, and I was in the middle of this hallway with all the professors, and I was trying so hard to make it to the end of the hallway without bursting in tears, and I couldn't, and I just had a complete meltdown. My other professor, who I'm friends with, he overheard me. He was like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm definitely not okay. He ended up pulling me in his office, and I ended up word vomiting everything, and we became really good friends. Really helped me through that entire nursing program after that. Last person I ever thought I'd confide in. It was a very, very bizarre moment. So In fall of 2015, I was finishing up nursing school, so I was almost done. I had a part-time job at this point, so I had some really supportive coworkers that knew what was going on, and my lawsuit was still just kind of unfolding. There was articles coming out and stuff like that. They said that DA wanted to speak to me. Like, and I knew this wasn't going to go to trial, but at that point, I realized that they hadn't investigated enough that they actually at least spoke to the DA. I ended up bringing a friend with me because, again, I didn't trust anybody. We met with the DA. She basically told me that we can't prosecute this case. This is my actual sexual assault again. This is not about the NYPD. Can't prosecute. There's not enough evidence. She was nice, but again, it was just, what was the point after all that? I did get a phone call from that male detective, the lieutenant. They actually did talk to the rape. He lived in New York part-time and lived in LA part-time. So they actually flew to LA and interviewed him, which I was like, okay, someone finally talked to him.
Hey, it's RC Gray from Survivor School. Did you know that trauma is not just a mental health problem? It's a whole life problem. It doesn't just impact your mind, it takes a toll on your body, your finances, your relationships, and your ability to grow. Survivor School provides you with the trauma-informed tools to help you regain control of your whole life and take control of your future today. Because healing is a journey of 1,000 destinations. Join Survivor School. We'll lead the way.
2015 till in 2015, they closed my case officially. Like that was it. I graduated nursing school, and then I was about to go volunteer in South Africa for a month when there was a new headline that the detective Skorzewski was countersuing me for $1 million for slander and defamation. My lawyer was like, this is ridiculous. Don't worry about it. He doesn't have a case here. They're just trying to like grasp at straws. While this is going on, basically our fight at this point was to hold the city accountable, saying this is the city's fault. The city should pay for this. It's not just two detectives. It's a systemic problem. So the city had a fight, and then the detectives had a fight. So my lawyer is saying the city needs to be held accountable. The city's like, we're not responsible. It's just these two rogue guys. So also was going on, I was in South Africa. I came home, took my boards, got a nursing job, started working as a nurse in 2016. We had to go to court one day. I forget what it was for, but Korzewski and Lamboy were there. I saw them. We were all in court. It was like a pre-hearing or so. I don't know what it was. We didn't end up going to court. It was the first time I'd been in a courtroom for this. I remember they were on one side and I was on another side. And we were all leaving at one point, and my lawyer was pretty protective of me, didn't want me to face them. We mistimed like an exit, and then I got caught in a room with Skorzewski for a second, face to face with him, and we locked eyes for a second, and it was the most petrifying moment. Not physically afraid, but like all of this emotion just came up. The last people you want to see are basically your abusers face to face, and I was 2 feet from him, and I'll just never forget that moment. I couldn't function the rest of the day. At this point, the city offered to settle for $30,000. My lawyer was like, no, this is a 6-figure case. What they did is unconscionable. This is a 6-figure case. He did a really, really great job, and I will just give him credit for what he did. The way that it worked was that instead of me paying him, he would take a third of whatever we settled for, would get part of the settlement, was basically doing all this work, not like pro bono, but like assuming we were going to get something. And he worked really, really hard on the case. He worked really, really hard on it. He had me go see like a psychiatrist for not a psych eval to like in my fit to stay in trial, but to show the damage that it had done to me because I had PTSD. I couldn't even face anyone in the police department. If I saw a uniformed officer, I would have a complete anxiety attack. Like it was, I don't even know how I functioned in New York as long as I did. A couple times I had to take care of NYPD officers in my job, and I would have panic attacks like going into the room with them alone. So it really affected me, my day-to-day life, and you see them everywhere. So it constantly was triggering me, and it was a big deal. He had me go see this high-end profiler that he does psychological profiling on like criminal cases. So did a lot of work to get this to at least get somewhat of a decent settlement. 2017 comes around and still going on. And then something happened where the city decided, nope, we're not accountable. It's just those two guys that are the problem. So what that ended up meaning was that we were just suing two broke cops that didn't have any money. And it wasn't for the money, but the point was is that the city was not going to take any responsibility. And this is important because with our survivor group that we have people who were wronged by the NYPD in 2010 all the way up until last year. This is a systemic problem. The city is absolutely responsible. It's like when hospitals don't take responsibility for like a systemic problem. You try to hang the two
Yeah.
people out to dry, which, yes, those are two bad people. This is a systemic problem. Like, it's not just me. That has been made evident the last few years. I really think everyone in that unit was like, I don't know what he had said about me, but like they all treated me like shit except for that one detective. Like after, again, I'm just assuming here and speculating, but I think his wife found out or found something, and then that's when he cut me off. And then I had like this wake up call, like, oh shit, what if he just cuts off my case? But that's essentially what he did. Every detective in that precinct knew about it. They all cold shouldered me. They all treated me
Yeah.
like I was some lunatic that was just making shit up, and it's a systemic problem. I'm not the only one that's been treated like this. But somehow the city got off and they just said, nope, these are two rogue detectives and it's on them. The judge, I guess, said something to my lawyer. He's like, you should consider settling. So at this point, I get a call from my attorney. He was like, I need to talk to you. The detective's attorneys were going to call Mariska Hargitay to testify against me. And that was the moment where I cannot go to court. I cannot go to court and face them and SVU, the show. I can't do it. I will have a complete mental breakdown. I was barely functioning at the time. And I wanted to pull up the article about Mariska. Yeah, okay, so this is what the headline says. Law and Order SVU star Mariska Hargitay testifies against cop charged with sexual assault case. Listen to that headline. Law and Order SVU star Mariska Hargitay testifies against cop charged with sexual assault case. Okay, so keep that headline in mind. It makes it sound like she's speaking out against the officer. She's speaking out against me. Law
Oh,
and Order SVU actress Mariska Hargitay, who plays Lieutenant Olivia Benson in the series, was questioned by New York City Police District Internal Affairs Bureau detectives after allegations of a rape victim against two real-life police officers. The incident happened in January 2013 when two cops, because they took me out drinking in July of 2013. January 2013 when two cops allegedly took the victim drinking after she was interviewed. The officers who were accused of the crime are Officer Lucas Skorzuski and retired Lieutenant Adam Lamboy. The two called on Mariska Hargitay to stand last week to testify. Hargitay had interactions with the victim. The two cops maintained that the Law and Order SVU star maintained interactions with the victim. Reports said that according to the court papers, Hargitay, along with the cast of the series Law and Order and SVU, interacted with the woman. There were also reports the victim and the actress met and may have talked about the incident. According to a city law department lawyer, officers from Internal Affairs spoke with Hargitay after the incident was reported. It was also revealed that the woman said and Hargitay also corresponded through email. This is the one. Law and Order star Mariska Hargitay talked to NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau investigators following allegations a real-life cop groped an alleged rape victim. Two disgraced cops accused of taking the victim drinking after her initial interview with them, Officer Lucas Skorzuski, 32, and now retired Lieutenant Adam Lamboy, 45, said in court papers last week they want to call Hargitay to the witness stand as their witness. They maintain the actress had interactions with the woman. Hargitay will testify regarding interactions with the woman and woman's previous interactions with the cast of the television show Law and Order SVU, according to court filings first reported by the Daily News. Documents obtained by the news last week also indicate the victim and Hargitay met and may even have talked about the alleged January 2013 assault. During a hearing Tuesday, a lawyer from the city law department said internal affairs officers did speak with Hargitay after the woman reported the incident with Lamboy and Skorzuski. There were emails from the woman, whom the news is not naming, to Hargitay as well. The woman's lawyer, Christopher Galliardo, is fighting to request to call Hargitay, arguing the actress's testimony would be prejudicial against his client. Then they go into talking about what happened. Then it says Skorzuski is looking forward to his day in court and proving he was slandered, said his lawyer, Peter Brill. The cop has sued the woman for $2 million, claiming her public statements about the incident have left his reputation in tatters. Reps for Hargitay, who plays Detective Olivia Benson on the sex crimes-focused cop show, did not respond to requests for comment. So basically, the headline says that, oh, she's standing up for a real-life rape victim. No, they were going to call her to the stand to say how crazy I was. And I saw that my lawyer gave me, I think they had to redact some things, but like gave me the document. And they were saying that I was mentally unwell, like I was unstable, that I was crazy. She was saying this stuff about me. And that's what they were going to call to the stand. So again, like that I was quote unquote stalking them because I happened to be staying right where they were filming. So I saw this and I told him, I was like,
I can't do this. I cannot go to court and face her and them. I can't do it. So he was fighting to not have this in there anyways. And then it finally came to be that the city was like, nope, we're hands off. We're not responsible for this. It's just these two. So at that point, we were suing just these two cops and we settled for pennies. I barely saw any money. So I finally moved out of New York. Everywhere I went was trauma. Like literally, like either SVU was filming somewhere or I would see NYPD. I ran into Mariska's husband twice. I literally ran into him. I was running and I physically ran into him and his children one day. It took me the rest of the day to recover from that because I was so anxious. And then I saw him at Whole Foods once. I ran into one of the actors twice. He liked me. Again, he didn't know who I was. I had a lovely conversation with him on the subway once. We talked about music. I was petrified every time I ran into somebody, what they would say about me or what they thought. And again, as this was going on, I had moved to New York to be a writer. Like I wanted to work as a nurse and then be a writer. Slowly, as the years went on, these people that I was Facebook friends with just for networking purposes slowly unfriended me. I remember one conversation I had. He was a producer or writer, I forget who he was. He and I had chatted on Facebook a couple times, and I was trying to get someone else that I could talk to mentor me. One day he messaged me. He's like, "Wait, where do I know you from?" And I was like, "What do you mean? We have mutual friends." He's like, "No, how do I know you?" I knew where it was going. And I said something like, "We have mutual friends." Like, I was on the set this day, and then he blocked me just out of the blue. I have nothing here. I have nothing left here. I finally moved out of New York in summer of 2017. My lawsuit closed and we settled, which I like didn't see anything. My lawyer, he, bless his heart, he waived a bunch of fees because he didn't get paid anything. I didn't get anything. And he was like, I really tried. I was like, I know you did. Like, he worked really, really hard. And in hindsight, like the city wanted to initially settle for $30,000, and I, wish we would have. But the city should have been responsible. They should have been held accountable.
Rachel, I am so, so sorry for all of this. Sorry and empathy just don't cut what I feel for you. This is horribly
Yeah.
unjust. And I just
Well, I
really
appreciate
feel
that.
for you.
So I left New York. Again, I really, really appreciate my attorney. He was wonderful and he worked really, I mean, it was 2 years that he spent on this case, basically. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't about the money, but it ruined my life, really. I don't want to sound dramatic, but it changed the course of my life forever. And it took years off my life. I mean, hopefully not like actual years, but like I lost years of my life to this. I left the city that I love because of this. I was a liability because an SVU writer sexually assaulted me and I had this interaction with the NYPD. I was a liability and they wrote me off. So they called me crazy. They said that I was making things up. They said I was a stalker. The anger that I have at SVU, the TV show, has never gone away. And I've never had closure with that. I never got to say my piece. I'm really big on, I like to say my piece at least and be heard. And I never got that chance. As I was working through all this stuff with Christine when I was at NYU, used to use the term, we're putting stuff in buckets and we're going to get to the buckets and let's put all the SVU stuff in a bucket over here and we'll get to that. And we never did. So I never really worked through that. And I still can't watch the show. Like it'll come on and I have to change the channel. Even at my last job when I was in Louisiana, I would have patients, I'd walk in their room and they would be watching SVU and I would see his name on the screen. It still bothers me. It doesn't control my life, but it still bothers me. I got back to Seattle, and it wasn't until I got back to Seattle, I had no idea how much I was suffering while I lived in New York. And, I moved there with a purpose and I didn't get to do that. And then my life was ruined because of it. The trajectory of what I wanted my life to look like never happened because of what happened between the actual assault, the writer, all the fallout from that. It's kind of like when the Harvey Weinstein stuff happened, it's what it reminded me of like how if you have an allegation against a powerful person, everyone will protect that person. We're part of the brotherhood and we're going to protect this person and you're making it up. It was so relatable. So I actually met one of the women that testified against him to put him to prison. I met her at a meditation retreat 2 years ago. We had a very long talk because she was the first person that could actually understand because it's very different. And this is not better or worse, but it's when you're going up against someone who's a high profile person or has power, it's a very different experience, especially with the protection that they have in terms of just their status in the community. You will automatically be written off, especially if you're an actress, like trying to make it and you're assaulted by a Hollywood director. Your life is ruined. That's just how it works, unfortunately. And that's what happened to me. Like everyone cut me off. All the connections I had, even people that I thought were my friends, they all cut me off in this TV show. And in this industry, you need an in. Like you need to be good, but it helps to have someone that can help you. And I lost all of that. So I moved back to Seattle. At the time, a couple articles had come out about the lawsuit and stuff like that. And then in 2017, before I moved, I had read an article in the Gothamist that had come out about another rape victim that had been also screwed over. And they talked about her story. And I was like, I want to meet her. Maybe we could talk through some things. So at the same time, I contacted the reporter. She had also contacted the reporter saying that she wanted to meet me because in the article she mentioned hearing about my case and my story and how was he allowed to investigate another rape while he was under scrutiny. And normally, as a nurse or something, if you're under investigation, they remove you for patient care for whatever reason. You'll be assigned somewhere where you're not involved in patients. And meanwhile, he's being investigated for groping me and he's still investigating sexual assault. So while he's being investigated for my internal affairs complaint, he's investigating her rape and he wrote her off. Well, her name is Rachel and she's from Seattle. So why do you think he wrote her off? Probably because he was reminded of another Rachel for Seattle. We ended up meeting and we became friends. We're still friends to this day. There was a couple articles that were in the process of coming out, and then it was for the Gothamist or there's another article or newspaper, like online platform that ended up closing down or something. So we were in contact with this reporter. They ended up not running the story. I was upset. We were going to go public for the first time. We wanted to be public about it together. And I would see power in numbers, right? So the two of us. End of 2017, early 2018, Newsweek magazine decided to run our story. I don't remember how or why that happened, but of all avenues, Newsweek is a pretty decent magazine. My mom was like, "Do you realize that sits next to Time in the bookstore?" And I'm like, "I didn't realize that." Little did I know. We ended up going public. The journalists did a really, really good job at trying to get our stories right. There's a lot of nuances, a lot of details, and he did a phenomenal job getting the stories right. For the first time, we were public. So there was the two of us. Her rapist was sent to prison, but because Skorzewski didn't investigate her rape, her rapist ended up raping another woman. It was a stranger rape, so they quote unquote took it more seriously. So she was like, what the fuck? Like, if you had listened to me, and again, her story's in our Newsweek magazine. It's not my place to tell her story, but he didn't investigate her assault. And then that person raped another woman. She actually had serious injuries. Rachel, my friend, did. She had pretty significant injuries. It was something that very much could have been prosecuted based on the injuries alone. And he didn't take her seriously. So that rapist went out and raped another woman. And I remember being just so anxious. They had a professional photographer come and take photos. I saw the online version before I saw the print article. And then when I got the print article, I opened up the title page and my face was on a 2-page spread on the title page. It was a little scary because I was, well, I'm really out there now. And a part of me hoped, I was like, you know what? I really hope Mariska sees this. I hope SVU sees this. And it was very interesting because Mariska Hargitay is very vocal when it comes to issues surrounding women's rights, and dead silence when our news article came out. And I'm almost positive she saw it. A lot of people saw it. A lot of people read Newsweek. It was on the news. I'm sure it popped up in her reality somewhere. Crickets. And I'm like, yeah. I'm not surprised that she didn't say anything, but Mariska Hargitay has done some good by at least exposing the issue of sexual violence, but never got to say my piece and have that closure for that. So April 2018, that article came out in Newsweek, and it was a really great moment. And that was kind of the moment that I can finally close this chapter. So this has been 5 years of my life, and I'm finally ready to close that chapter. I felt really strong. It was very empowering, I should say. I was really clear that when they wrote the article that it not be written from a victim standpoint. Don't portray me as a victim. I don't want that. And Rachel was the same way. And I mentioned in the article, that's why I liked her. We both have very successful careers. We're very successful women. We did not let this ruin our lives when we had every reason or right to. We had a lot of shit happen. And I had someone tell me once that he passed away, my high school teacher. He was always my mentor. He was one of the most amazing people I ever knew. But he said to me once, not many people would have survived what you've been through. That always stood out to me. And I remember talking to Rachel about it. And it was I liked her because she's like me in the sense that we're being wronged. We want to do something about it. So we did. And we both reached out to the same journalist. Hey, we want to meet. And then we ended up coming out in a Newsweek. Unbeknownst to me, after that article came out, there was a couple other survivors that came out with stories about how they were wronged by the NYPD as well. So a couple more lawsuits started happening. And then there was a group of us that formed that were mostly women that were wronged by the NYPD, called herself the NYPD Survivors Group. I met other women survivors that had been wronged, severe mistreatment along the way. A typical story, just like not be taken seriously, saying, "Oh, are you sure you said no?" Just like the way that you hear people be treated. There's lots of stories like that. Again, some that were grossly mistreated, many that had cases closed, all had controlled phone calls. Like that's their go-to. So there was a pattern here. So we were just pooling our heads together, like, what else can we do? While this was happening, it was COVID. I was travel nursing, ER was crazy. At some point, the Department of Justice decided to think about looking into the NYPD Special Victims Unit. After so many complaints, they said, hey, maybe we'll open an investigation. So in November of 2021, I sat on Zoom and I testified in front of the Department of Justice, which is petrifying. Again, I was like, this is something that I thought I was done with. Okay, here is another opportunity that maybe something can be done. Let me see what I can do. I had a written testimony. I was so nervous. Number one, I hadn't talked about this in years. And again, it was legal people, and I do not like law enforcement, no offense. Anything with law enforcement, I do not trust. So I was petrified. So I was literally shaking, and I had this whole thing written out, my testimony, and I think I read it. I'm usually a pretty good public speaker, but I was so nervous. Then I had to work. I had to work right afterwards. So I read this whole statement about basically my story and what happened. And why I begged them. I was like, please, like, this is a systemic problem. Please open an investigation. So I wasn't supposed to be the first one, but I ended up being the first one to testify. And then in July of 2022, I was driving across the country for a travel nurse contract. I remember I'd been thinking like, hey, like, I wonder what happened with that DOJ investigation. I haven't heard anything. And I kid you not, as I was driving, I was in a parking lot in like middle of nowhere, like Nebraska or something, getting gas. And I got a phone call from an unknown number. I never answer those, but I had a feeling I should answer this one, so I answered it. And it was the Department of Justice. And they said, just so you know, I want to tell you in person that we are officially opening an investigation into the NYPD. And I wanted you to be the first person that I told. And I sat there and I cried because I was like, fucking finally. 9 years, literally 9 years after my thing had happened with them, they were fucking listening. How many times does something have to go wrong before they pay attention? But I just sat there and I cried. Finally, someone is listening. So that was in 2022. It's been kind of crickets for 2 years up until a few months ago, where with at the time pending election, we were like, what's going to happen if there's a turnover? What's going to happen? So I emailed them, the Department of Justice. I found a couple emails from them, and I emailed them back like, hey, what's the status? And they said very cryptic, typical legal stuff. We're still actively investigating this matter. That's all we can say. And I was like, okay, that was like July of this past year. Well, Trump comes in, and immediately after the election, there was an article that came out that said there was a very high probability that open DOJ investigations, specifically into law enforcement, would be shut down. One of my friends in our group was interviewed in this article. I cried, but not in a good way. Are you kidding me? I was like, if they shut this down, I have waited so long for something to be done. And then again, another article came out recently, like a couple weeks ago, that they are threatening to shut down this investigation. And we got an email from the person who has been coordinating these efforts saying that they have every intention of keeping up the investigation and all this kind of bullshit fluff, that I'm like, we're not getting any real answers. And there's a very real possibility that Trump will shut this down. He loves law enforcement, but he pardons criminals. We all know that. If he shuts this down, this ruined my life. And this is something that will finally maybe bring some form of justice. And if he decides to shut this down, there will be holy hell raised. I am not okay for someone who's okay with that happening. The other things that we could probably spend hours talking about is that all this has affected my life in ways that I'm still learning, just how I interact in relationships, the type of men that I've dated because of this. It has been a long-standing effect on my life. For the possibility of some form of justice to finally be there and then have it maybe taken away is like, it's a horrible feeling. And we don't know what's going to happen.
What are the actions and plans and ideas that you have in terms of you yourself, as well as those other survivors of the New York Police Department, going to do to try and keep this investigation alive? And what will you do if it is shut down?
Frankly, I don't know. My thing is, I'm speaking out. So I went to the Women's March in DC. So I live in DC now, and it's a great place to be in terms of things that are happening. I was hoping that when I first moved here that I was going to be celebrating our first female president, which would be really cool, but that didn't happen. And so now I'm like, well, I'm going to fight. I went to the People's March a few weeks ago. I ended up carrying around a sign that had a coat hanger on it, which symbolized the pre-legality of abortion and how that's important to me because of I didn't get pregnant from my assault, but I know people who did, and it was horrible. And to be forced to give birth to a child that was conceived by rape should not be okay. I was interviewed by NPR when I was there, which was also a surprise. I wasn't even going to go. It was really so they posted my story, which was great. But what I was not prepared for was the comments. And again, people saying horrible things about me. And it brought up all those memories of the comments that I was reading on the articles. Stuff like questioning my mental stability and like, oh, is she really a nurse? Like just like stupid shit like, oh man, if her whole, because I said that I've devoted part of my career to basically standing up for survivors. And someone said, oh, if your whole career is devoted to making abortion legal, you have mental issues. And I made the mistake of, again, reading the comments. I had a complete panic attack and I was like, okay, I need to deactivate Instagram because here we go again. Here I am just reading all this shit. And like people think that they can just say shit about you hiding behind a screen. Just people making horrible comments about, I said I have an IUD. I hope she needs it when she walks down the alley, insinuating that they hope I get raped. It was horrible. What is wrong with people?
Yeah. That's craziness. That's stupidity.
So I'm going to keep speaking out. If it does get shut down, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. I'm just hoping that they don't. I hope that we have the opportunity to at least have a say. What our group has been talking about is that we hope that they'll just leave it alone. We usually want it in the spotlight, but if it's not right now, then maybe that's a good thing because then he's not thinking about it. And if he thinks about it, he'll shut it down. But if he doesn't, they'll keep doing what they're doing behind the scenes. We wanted at least preliminary findings to be released if they do decide to shut it down, but we've gotten nothing. Maybe like it'll be left alone for now.
And you are you said keeping in touch with all of the others of that group.
not as frequently. We kind of went quiet for a while. Like there just wasn't anything going on, but we have like a signal group that we talk through. Yeah, there's a lot at stake for us. I know that a couple of them again have lawsuits. They're pursuing like legal means, like civil lawsuits, either against their perpetrators or the NYPD as options. I'm still learning how this has affected me. I have a great trauma therapist, and we're working a lot on basically rewiring the nervous system because trauma changes our brain and our wiring. I am just learning on how that's affected me in terms of relationships and the type of people that I've dated, which have not been healthy people. And I didn't even understand that was tied to my trauma until recently. So I'm 12 years post-assault, and I'm still realizing how it's affected me in ways that I didn't even realize.
Yeah. And I'm really thankful that you're learning about that because knowing what the neuroscience of trauma is and how it works is, I think, a great step in dealing with that.
Yeah, and one of the hardest thing is learning that I've dated the same type of guy repeatedly and the same patterns show up over and over. And that's because of what my nervous system is used to, which is the state of fight or flight. And I've been attracted to very unhealed people, which in turn create these semi-abusive situations. Or if they're not abusive, they're so unhealed that even though they're not abusive, they're still pretty fucked up, but it's so much better than what I had that I don't even realize how fucked up it is. I've always said that the worst feeling is when the people that you don't expect to hurt you end up hurting you. That was true throughout that whole process with SVU, the show, the NYPD. And I went through a breakup last year, which was actually the most painful thing I've ever gone through in my entire life because I finally had relaxed and felt safe around somebody and they hurt me. I said this to my therapist recently. That breakup was the most painful thing I've ever been through. And she was, that's really saying something because you've been through a lot. It's sad, but it is because it's these people that you really trust that don't think are going to hurt you that do.
You've articulated that, but the part that I think even adds the kicker is that not only do you think they're going to help you, not only do you think that you're safe with them, they're supposed to be helping you. That's their job. It's not this thing where there's this offset of, well, yeah, I'm empathic for you and I'm sorry that that happened to you and you can trust me in hearing your story and helping you through those things. But if it's their job to go after the people that have harmed you and they end up harming you, I think that even amplifies and exacerbates the horrificness of it.
This is a systemic problem that spans decades. We want the DOJ investigation because it would at least have a federal spotlight on the issue. And that was like our ray of hope, the one thing that's been keeping us going. I would love to see change in our lifetime. I don't know if it's going to happen. I want to be a part of it, which is why I'm talking to you. I would love to go and speak to people. I want to change things. That's what I want to do. If that means speaking out about what happened to me, I'm okay to do that now. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but if they shut that investigation down, that was our like lifeline into having change actually happen.
It's part of why I do this podcast, is to normalize the conversation, bring this to light, talk about it over and over and over again till people finally wake up to the fact that rape culture is destroying lives and we're protecting rapists and we're destroying victims and survivors.
And that's the thing that, again, it's like these people are supposed to help us.
Rachel, I not only want to thank you for telling your story, but also for what you do as a nurse and all the strength that takes in excelling in your field and taking care of people. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Well, I guess I wanted to give back as much as I could. And, I did that forensic nursing for a little bit. And I'm hoping that hopefully this will reach someone and say that healing is possible. I'm not perfectly healed by any means, but I think considering things that I've gone through, it's pretty miraculous that I'm alive, really. I even said this in one of my articles. Someone else would have killed themselves by now. I don't even say that as a joke. There were times where I just want to die. Like, I can't do this anymore. There's some people that would have happened to, I'm sure, because the stuff that I had to deal with, it was awful. Again, I'm still living with some of it today, but I'm glad I'm in a place that I can, hopefully again do something about it. And I do hope that it does help somebody.
Yeah, thank you. We'll stay in touch. We'll collaborate with each other as much as possible, and we will look forward to having you back on the show in the future to give us an update of where you're at.
And talk more about neurobiology, trauma, and all the fun things that I could talk all day about.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I appreciate, again, everything that you do. It's really special that you do this type of platform for people like me, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that because it's fuel to my soul.
It's really awesome.
Thanks. That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is the final episode of Rachel's interview, but Rachel's story isn't over. She and her support group continue to strive for a conclusion to the DOJ investigation of the New York Police Department's Special Victims Unit, and Rachel is unwavering in her desire to help others gain insight and strategies that help reduce the prevalence of rape and sexual assault in our society. I can't thank Rachel enough for her willingness to spend many hours with me in recording these episodes. Rachel, you did an amazing job, and I admire your strength and fortitude. You are an inspiration to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault everywhere. I want to encourage all of you to help bring justice to victims and survivors. One of the best ways to do this is to start by believing when a victim or survivor reaches out to tell their story, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault, and because it's time that we start to normalize these conversations in order to reduce the impact of rape culture in our society. Please leave me a 5-star rating on this podcast platform and email me a note of encouragement and support. Your emails are fuel to my soul in keeping this podcast going. My email address is in the episode notes, and I'd truly appreciate hearing from you. Thank you again for being here, and be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new and impactful episode right here on Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. We'll see you next week.
Trauma doesn't just affect your mental health. It impacts every area of your life. At Survivor School, we offer a comprehensive trauma-informed approach to healing through 4 key pillars: health and wellness, wealth and career, love and relationships, and happiness and healing. We help you restore the balance in your body. We help you rebuild financial security, and we help you heal your relationships and rediscover your sense of purpose. I'm Marcy Gray, the founder and CEO of Survivor School, and we help you pick up where therapy leaves off, giving you the resources to heal and thrive in real life. Join us today and start your journey toward a fuller, more fulfilling life.